right. Every Friday night. Stories that are creepy, suspenseful, and most of all, frightful. So pop your popcorn, dim the lights, and prepare for another Fright Night Radio.
Monstrum. Juan took a long pull on his beer.
"You're renting out a room?"
He said.
"What the fuck for?"
We were at my place, about 6 MGDs into a Friday evening. After beer number 3, profanity became an entrenched staple of Juan's vocabulary. "Why not?" I said. "I've got some extra space, and times are tight." Juan grunted. He knew when I was bullshitting. "Fine, I'm doing it to shake things up a bit."
"What, you're bored?"
"Maybe. I go to work, go out for drinks, hang out with you,
"So I'm boring." "Great."
and go to bed. Or pass out."
"You should date Valerie. That would shake things up. You know you want to. She can move in here and fuck the boredom right out of you."
Valerie was the resident hot babe at the office I had my eye on. But I didn't want Valerie to move in. I wanted somebody new in my life to spice things up. Not that I had anything to complain about. I worked a job that wasn't too demanding, had some good friends like Juan, lived in a decent apartment in the Edgewater neighborhood of Chicago, right near a Red Line stop, and just a few blocks from the Lakefront Trail. All in all, a nice setup. But nice is a code word for boring. And I had an extra room in my place, so why not rent it out? I had placed an online ad and met some prospective housemates. A lawyer named Robert, who just needed a bit of extra office space. A goth girl with a pet banana slug. A couple of frat boys. Unfortunately, none of them were quite who I was looking for. Juan said,
"Roommates can make your life a living hell, man."
Then my intercom buzzed. It was 9:11 p.m. The air turned electric like an approaching storm. Juan and I exchanged looks.
"Don't answer it. Sit back down."
Something told me Juan had the right idea, that I should ignore the buzzer. But my body jumped up, as if yanked by a puppeteer, and my finger pushed the talk button. "Hello?"
"I'm here,"
came a voice, like a hot, dry Santa Ana wind, straight out of a Raymond Chandler story.
"About the room."
"No. Hell no. Send him away." I depressed the button to let him into the foyer. I heard the buzzing of the entry door, followed by a heavy footfall. Then more footfalls, tromping up the steps and through the second door. More steps. The air crackled, and every hair on my body stood at attention. Somebody rapped on my door. 3 solid booms that reverberated through my apartment. I approached the door and glanced at Juan. He crossed himself, took a long pull on his beer, and shook his head no. Juan was right. I should send the stranger packing, and yet my body wouldn't listen to my brain. Like 5 little traitors, my fingers turned the deadbolt and opened the door. And there he stood. The monstrous being from an incomprehensible universe. He appeared as a man, tall, handsome, and impeccably attired in a double-breasted Armani suit. And yet a monstrous aura enshrouded the human facade, and I knew beyond all doubt that this being could not be from any realm encompassed by mere human understanding. I also knew my life would never be the same. I refer to this being as he only because I know of no pronoun denoting a legion of non-existent entities. This was the creator and destroyer of worlds, the undoer of reality, the all-knowing, unknowable one. What else could he be but the monstrous being from an incomprehensible universe? From behind me came Juan's voice. "Diablo, fuck!" The monstrous being peered at me, silver eyes blazing. I knew at once he was both blind and all-seeing. I could not begin to return his gaze, lest I go mad. It took all my strength merely to stay upright and not pass out cold. I was vaguely aware of my jaw opening and closing like a screen door caught in a storm. Again, that voice drifted like a zephyr. "Hello." It was more than a spoken word. It went beyond telepathy and transcended language. He went on, "May I come in?" Each word was a religious experience. I backed from the door while my hands made silly welcoming gestures. By sheer force of will, I spoke. "David. My name, it's David, and this is Juan." "Diablo, stay back." "Call me Fred," intoned the incomprehensible one. Something broke inside me, and I burst into laughter. Fred? Fred? I could never refer to this entity as Fred. I forced myself to stop laughing before I devolved into hysterics. "I'm sorry, I can't call you Fred. I just can't. Isn't there some other name you go by?" I won't say this being smiled, but the concept of delight momentarily emanated from him. And he said, "Monstrum. They call me Monstrum." And with that, miraculously, the ice was broken. I led him to the spare room. It's small, but you're welcome to hang out in the living room and use the kitchen if you're still interested. $300 a month. Oh, and $100 security deposit. "I possess no money." "Excuse me?" "This present being possesses no currency." "You're broke." "Broke? No. Fully functional, merely without funds." Monstrum glided to the window. Under his gaze, the house next door began to shimmer and melt, like the watches in that Salvador Dali painting. He seemed unconcerned over his financial status. I wondered if maybe he meant to intimidate me into letting him use the room. But monstrous, incomprehensible being or not, I found myself starting to get ticked off. Stammering only a bit, I told him that he damn sure needed to pay rent if he expected to reside in my home, no matter who or what he happened to be. At this point, I meant to lock eyes with him to show him I meant business. Alas, once my sight came within range of those all-seeing yet blind orbs, I blinked out of my here-now existence and shot back in time to the Cambrian era, where I lived an entire lifetime as a trilobite. I scuttled along the floors of silent seas, dining on plankton, exploring the world with my long antennae, and forming a complex relationship with sentient bacteria. As I adapted to living as a trilobite, my human life faded from memory until it seemed like nothing more than a faded dream. I approached maturity as a trilobite and became fascinated with an amazing female specimen. I was in awe of her hard carapace and finely articulated thorax. I sent out numerous telepathic messages of adoration. Eventually, she laid a cluster of eggs for me to fertilize. It was quite romantic. All in all, I was happy, as an arthropod. Until something with big teeth chomped me in half and I perished on the ocean floor. When I returned to my present life, a mere moment had passed. While I stood in my living room, trying to readjust to existing as a humanoid that walked on land and breathed air, Monstrum explained that money would not be a problem since his various future selves were wealthy and would travel back in time as needed to deliver funds. "I don't take future money," I said, marveling at how odd it was to use vocal cords. Trilobites communicated primarily via telepathy. Monstrum sighed, and the sound was like the destruction of worlds. A moment later, one of his doppelgangers from the future appeared with rent money and security deposit. I accepted the cash, and Monstrum moved in the next day. Monstrum didn't seem to mind that the room was small. He had space for a bed, a writing desk, and some piece of alien technology from his home universe. "What's that thing?" I said, pointing at the strange apparatus.
A paradox box.
"A what?"
A paradox box.
When he explained its function, I realized I had two choices. One, understand what he was saying and go stark raving mad, or two, shrug my shoulders and walk away. I chose the latter option. The day after Monstrum moved in, I came home from work and heard wind rustling from his room. The intensity rose and fell. I felt along the lower edge of his door, but felt no breeze through the crack. Maybe he had the alien equivalent of a television. I knocked. No response. "Monstrum?" No reply. I turned the doorknob and gently pushed. I half expected the door to be barred, or maybe even secured shut with a force field, but it gave just fine. I called once more, a bit louder, then stepped inside. His bed, writing table, and paradox box filled most of the room. And yet there was no lack of space, for beyond the edge of the room stretched a vast, craggy landscape. Wind gusted and died. A reddish sun blazed overhead. Rock formations jutted from the ground like giant gnarled fingers. Far off, among the formations, Monstrum was both there and not there. I whispered, "Hello, Monstrum?" A quantum field must have collapsed at that point, because suddenly Monstrum was unquestionably present. My whisper crept through the raging wind, and Monstrum turned toward me. My heart momentarily morphed into a frozen quail within my chest.
Hello. Do you like what I did with the place?
It's very innovative.
Thank you. Perhaps we should do lunch sometime.
That would be nice, I said, and backed slowly out of his room. Juan wasted no time telling everyone from the office that I was living with El Diablo. We were at our favorite happy hour bar on West Wacker when he broke this news. I corrected him, he's not the devil, he's the monstrous being from an incomprehensible universe. Nobody believed me, of course, until I passed around photos. In the photos, Monstrum peered out at everyone. Valerie gave a little scream. Careful, I told her, don't look directly at his eyes.
What's this creature do for a living?
Derek asked.
A living is meaningless to one who never dies,
said Monstrum's image. Derek gasped and dropped the picture.
What's he doing in our world?
Juan asked. He guzzled a beer, picked up one of the photos, and demanded,
What the fuck are you up to?
"Oh, watch it," I said. But too late. Juan's eyes glazed over as his consciousness leapt to some other space and time. Derek waved a hand in front of his face. Give him a minute. Really, he'll be just fine in a few moments.
So,
said Valerie.
this monstrous being, does he do his own dishes?
More questions followed. What was he like? Why was he here in our universe? And so on. I answered their questions as best I could. I had to invent some words to express the experience of living with Monstrum. As to why he was there, I explained that since everything must happen at some point in some universe, it was inevitable. Oh, and yes, he was very good about doing his own dishes. After answering all their questions, I started to understand Monstrum a little better myself. I picked up my beer and raised it to my mouth. It seemed a strange thing to do. Maybe the only reason I was doing it was because everything must happen. A hand tipped a glass to a mouth, and beer went down a throat. Was it my hand? My mouth, my beer, and my throat? I wasn't sure. Just as everyone sat around absorbing what I told them, Juan sucked in a deep breath and cast looks all around the table. Welcome back,
Jesus,
said Juan. Go somewhere, did you? Juan crossed himself.
Jesus, I met Jesus.
While at work one Wednesday, I received a text message from Monstrum.
Let's do lunch. Ooh, pick the place. I'll be there.
I was only vaguely aware the message was in alien script. I text messaged back, okay. When noon came, I stepped out of my cubicle with no destination in mind. I ended up at Paisano's. Monstrum was already seated and waiting. We conversed in a non-language medium that seemed oddly natural and reminded me of my life as a trilobite. We indulged in a long, leisurely lunch, since time itself tends to keep its distance from Monstrum. The atmosphere of Paisano's took on a crackling, charged quality while we sat talking about life in our different universes. Monstrum dined on select subatomic particles from the air around us. I had pizza with sausage and mushrooms. We both enjoyed cappuccinos afterward. I was starting to like Monstrum. I even called him Fred a couple times. Fred Monstrum. It was a sweltering July day. Inside, my lunch hour stretched like a warm piece of taffy. Outside, it began to snow. It was a busy time of year at work, and I started putting in overtime. Overtime meant more time with Valerie. Only it was difficult to remember why that was important. It seemed odd that I once wanted to mate with her, with all that squishy, vulnerable flesh, She seemed a ridiculous choice for a breeding partner. My mind drifted back to my trilobite mate, with her sturdy exoskeleton and finely articulated thorax. Now that was a female. But I was a human, damn it. I should do what humans do and seek to copulate with a female of my own species. I pointedly ignored Valerie until she invited herself over for supper on Friday. She cooked chicken parmesan in my kitchen. I provided her with intoxicants. While she pounded chicken breasts, I mentally compiled data about her and worked out a logarithm for seduction. It was a simple computation. I sat back and let my mouth make the correct utterances while my hands made the corresponding gestures. Her body temperature rose. Her galvanic skin response spiked and her pupils dilated. We consumed food, and I touched her just so.
Your eyes, she said. I could go mad looking in them.
I moved away from her. She came to me. I thought about my lifetime in that vast ocean world. My fingers unbuttoned her blouse as my feet walked her toward my bedroom. I told her to select a number from 1 to 100. She had difficulty with the simple request, but finally blurted,
99.
I brought her to orgasm 99 times. She moaned and screamed and whimpered, while my mind sought refuge in the silent Cambrian Sea. The next morning, I emerged from my room to find Fred Monstrum watching television in the living room. It seemed an oddly ordinary thing for him to be doing until I noticed that he was receiving transmissions from his home universe. I sat on the couch with him and watched. Surprisingly, I was able to understand some of the program. We talked.
Where's the female?
Monstrum asked. Still in a recuperative coma. She'll remain that way until noon. Time had lost much of its meaning, but it still occurred to me that it was the first of the month. Rent is due. A few minutes later, one of Monstrum's doppelgangers appeared. This one was utterly mad, insane. He wore no clothes but had evolved a coarse hide, like that of a rhino. Quantum packets of information assailed me, and I knew this doppelganger was from millions of years in the future. The oceans had boiled away, leaving only vast deserts. Future Monstrum's demented eyes peered around my living room. Tiny demons crawled from the brickwork of my fireplace, and I had to beat them back with the ash shovel. Beside me on the couch, present-day Monstrum sipped coffee and said,
Here you go.
Then future Monstrum held out a bucket of molten gold. I ran to the kitchen and returned with a potholder. The gold began to cool back into a solid as I set the bucket in front of the fireplace. Future Monstrum vanished. Present-day Monstrum switched the TV over to an Earth station. Two bodies were speaking to each other. It made no sense whatsoever. I asked Fred Monstrum if I could borrow his paradox box.
Yeah,
He grumbled.
keep it. I forgot what it's for anyway.
I went to his room and picked up the box.
Hello,
Whispered the box.
I've been waiting for you.
What are you doing? Everyone at the office kept asking me. Couldn't they see? I was flying a dark matter kite in the corridor. It it was such a natural thing to do. Why was everybody getting so bent out of shape? Around noon, Fred Monstrum poked his head in my cubicle and asked if I wanted to do lunch. Usually, I find a restaurant and you're there waiting for me.
You're not as predictable as you used to be.
I looked him in the eyes. He gasped and looked away. We went to Paisano's again. I absorbed some absolutely delightful neutrinos. Fred Monstrum ate lasagna. After our post-lunch cappuccinos, Fred yawned and stretched.
Well,
He said,
guess I should be getting back to the office.
I noticed a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, he was probably planning a little storage room rendezvous with Valerie. Strange, the things these squishy humans found enjoyable.
What about you?
He asked. I let my gaze rove about the restaurant. A server momentarily slipped into an alternate dimension. A chair suddenly forgot to exist. A cluster of forks plotted a conspiracy. What about me? I would be moving on. That is my way. Nobody could ever understand me or comprehend my ways. Reality itself tends to forget what it's doing when I'm about. I am from beyond the beyond. I am the all-seeing blind one, the legion of omnipresent, non-existent entities. I have no real home in this world, and am only here because everything must happen. I walk a lonely path. I am the monstrous being from an incomprehensible universe, and it is time for me to move on. Anybody got an extra room?
Thank you for tuning in to tonight's episode of Fright Night Radio. If you enjoyed our story, please give us a thumbs up. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you enjoy a frightful new tale every Friday night.